Hey class, this week we're going to talk about creativity and fashion design. Creativity is the backbone of fashion design. In fashion school, in design competitions, and in runway exhibitions, it is one of the criteria that is used to gauge one's work. But what is creativity really? So, what is the definition of creativity? So, Merriam Webster defines it as the ability to create. But truly, there is no universally agreed upon definition. There are, however, key aspects of creativity. Novelty is a core component of creativity. It is described as newness, uniqueness, and innovation. As it relates to fashion design, it concerns the degree of originality that the target audience will accept, rather than a total departure from what is currently known. Effectiveness is usually measured by whether the product works, whether it achieves something or solves something. The effectiveness of fashion design relates to whether the garment fulfills its reason for existing. Effectiveness can also be related to the quality of the workmanship, which speaks to the quality of a brand. Elegance refers to the more overall composure of a garment than the price of the materials. Elegance is the elusive quality of grace and chic that can make average design spectacular and make striving designers noteworthy. For a product to be deemed creative, it must be communicated with others via design competitions, runway shows, and showing collections at markets and/or trade shows. Communication can validate a creative idea through evaluation and feedback. Emotion. Many creatives have emotional ties to their work because they tend to draw design inspiration from personal aspects of themselves and their lives. They also invest huge amounts of time and energy into their work. Every new design is a creative birth, and as such, it is treated with regard and devotion. Designers want to have that shock factor or element of surprise with their work. They want it to be talked about. They want to create a buzz. They want their designs to fill that key aspect. Ethicality. Creative designers practicing ethical design tactics do not intentionally cause harm to others or the environment. From the materials used to the human labor needed to produce apparel, ethicality considers what is fair and what is decent. Who is creative? All of us. We are all considered creative. Now, the challenge is in maximizing the creativity that we already have. So, there's no one single method for enhancing creativity because it is so multifaceted. It is regarded as a normally distributed trait that is found in everybody, although to different degrees in different people, highly in some, less in others, and somewhere in between for yet others. It is impossible to have zero creativity, just as it is impossible to have zero intelligence. Cropley, 2002. Knowledge base. It is important to know history. Designers often refer to the past for inspiration. You often see references to the past in designers' pieces. A solid knowledge base is needed to sustain a pattern of creative design. However, knowledge does not guarantee creativity. It is rare to have new insights without an understanding of what is already known. The image here shows how a person with 3 bits of knowledge or information can make only 3 connections, but a person with 6 bits of knowledge can create 15 connections. And this aspect continues to multiply as more knowledge is gained. Designers should have knowledge of the historical aspects of dress and the underlying conditions that lead to developments in fashion. Designers look to history for the following reasons. There is no reason to reinvent the wheel. The past reveals a lot about clothing construction, sewing techniques, textiles used, and skills developed. Many of these tactics are still relevant today. Dress is considered an art form that can reveal much about the cultural sensibilities of an age. The appreciation of the cultural aspects of dress and their inherent meanings. Cultural aspects of dress are considered within the context of how a garment is developed and worn. Cultural tradition tends to arise out of necessity. Such skills in fabric construction, dyeing, and printing oftentimes have originated from the natural resources that are available to the people. An understanding of the origins, use for, and care of fabrics and textiles. Fiber and fabric properties indicates a garment's drape, feel, and will also tell how it will be worn on the body. Hence, it is important to choose fabrics that are compatible with the end use of the product. Awareness of legendary designers and the impact they make or made on the field. Many iconic designers have paved the way for designers today. It is important to have knowledge of these designers and what they have contributed to the industry. Familiarity with silhouettes, style terminology, and sources of information. All designers should know the basic silhouettes and have an understanding of fashion terminology. One should also be resourceful, knowing where to find information that they need. Knowledge of skills of the discipline, such as pattern making, dressmaking, and tailoring. Basic knowledge of the skills of the discipline is important as it aids the designer in creating a collection. So let's reference an example provided in the text. The marker mark's job is to maximize the usage of fabric in a garment. If a designer consistently designs styles that necessitate unwieldy pattern pieces, The marker mark may not be able to make an efficient marker. Too much fabric will then be required, and the cost of the garment may rise beyond the manufacturer's price point. So as you can see here, it is important to have a general understanding of skills such as marker making, pattern making, cutting, sewing, grading, technical designing, and pricing. Designers who work in large companies typically are not expected to have advanced knowledge in these areas. However, those that work in smaller companies are generally expected to perform such tasks. An aptitude for technology that is used and developed in the field. So technology is always evolving, and designers should stay abreast of new developments in fiber and fabric technology, as well as upgrades in the production and presentation software. Designers should also have an extensive understanding of their customer base or audience. It's important to understand that today's consumer is informed and they know what they want. So designers must be able to respond to consumer needs and demands. An understanding of anatomy and the proportion and movement of the human body is also important. Knowledge of anatomy and kinesietics, or body movement, is beneficial as it provides guidance to designers. Knowledge of the human form also assists the designer in knowing what looks good on the body. Designers should refer to real body proportions to ensure that their designs are flattering on the body rather than the exaggerated fashion figure. The guiding principles that support all design include the golden ratio, the elements and the principles of design, as well as color theory. So the golden rule. This is a dominating principle of proportion that translates to a ratio of roughly 3 parts to 5 parts of an 8-part whole. When dividing any length by 8, 3 of the parts will be in the pleasing proportion to the remaining 5 parts. So designers can use this to create harmonious designs. So the elements and principles of design include line, color, shape, texture, and pattern. So line refers to either the boundaries of a garment or to the style lines, seaming, and detailing that partition areas within a garment. The placement, spacing, and direction of a line can draw the eye to, across, or around a given area. Thus, it can create visual illusions that can make a body appear shorter, taller, slimmer, or wider. Specific colors are the result of the interaction of their attributes, namely hue, which is a basic color family, value, which is the lightness or darkness, and chroma, which is brightness. So color can evoke a psychological and emotional response, and it can also create optical illusions. In fashion, a collection's color palette must be appropriate for its designated end use, season, location, and target customer. Now, shape refers to the form resultant from perceived boundaries external to or within a garment. Silhouette is used to describe a garment's outer shape. Commonly encountered garment silhouettes include A-line, hourglass, wedge, and tube. Texture refers to the surface appearance and hand or feel of a fabric. A fabric's texture is dictated by its fibers, yarns, construction, finish, and surface design. Common terms used to describe fabric texture include crisp, dry, lofty, nubby, scratchy, smooth, silky, spongy, and rough. A fabric's texture significantly influences its end use and should be considered prior to beginning the design process. So patterns are created by arranging shapes, lines, textures, prints, and/or design elements. They can be scaled to be in proportion to the wearer and the shapes within a garment. Large prints are generally broken up and distorted by lots of seaming, but your smaller prints are often used for children's wear because they are compatible with a smaller body frame. In general, complicated prints complement simple shapes, and simple patterns are applied to garments with lots of body seaming and detailing. Design principles include proportion, balance, emphasis, harmony, and repetition. So proportion is the scale of each of the garment's elements in relation to each other, the garment as a whole, and the body. The impact of proportion can be manipulated through the use of color, texture, and pattern. Pleasing proportions can be achieved by referring to the golden ratio. Balance is the distribution of visual weight within a garment. Every garment displays one of two types of balance. You have formal, which is also known to be symmetrical, and this is where a garment appears reserved and static because the entire composition is composed of uniform or repeating units. With informal or asymmetrical, balance can create additional visual interest because a composition can contain a series of varied units. So emphasis refers to the designating of a focal point of a garment. So a designer will emphasize certain aspects of a design in an attempt to draw the eye to that location. Too many focal points can confuse the viewer and make a design look busy and unprofessional. A design with no focal point can be uninteresting and lackluster. So consider this particular design here from Alexander McQueen's Ready to Wear 2023 Spring Collection. Where do you find your eye being most drawn to? I find my eye being most drawn to the center or the bodice of the garment. Also think about makeup. So oftentimes with makeup, one usually selects a focal point on the face. So whether that is the lips or the eyes, for example. But usually you're not going to have too bright or very demanding areas where you're applying makeup on the face. So usually you won't have bold eyes and a bold lip. It's either going to be a bold lip and more subtle eyes, or more subtle lips and a bold eye. Harmony and unity refer to the cohesion of all elements of a design. A harmonious design is one in which all component parts complement and reflect one another. A garment is said to have unity when all elements and principles of a design are in agreement. Repetition is the frequency of use of a motif, a line, or an element in an apparel item. It creates rhythm or movement within the garment. Progressive rhythm indicates graduation or sporadic variation in size and or placement of elements. Uniform rhythm is achieved through the exact repetition of a particular element. Uniform rhythm can easily become monotonous. Color theory. So color is one of the drivers that determines whether a consumer will purchase a garment. Rarely do consumers purchase an item if they do not like the color, even if the styling and the fit are satisfactory. So color theory is of the utmost importance to fashion designers. It is a garment's first impression. It's used to make a statement, to tell a story, to attract attention, and to energize styling. The first task to creating a collection is to select a harmonious color palette. Color science. Wavelengths. A narrow range of the electromagnetic spectrum is visible to the human eye. This is the portion that contains the wavelengths that we recognize as color. Variations in those wavelengths are why we see different colors. So the shortest wavelengths is seen as violet. The longest wavelengths is seen as deep red. And in between the two is blue, green, yellow, and orange. There are three qualities of color: hue, value, and chroma. Now, the term hue is often used interchangeably with color. It is determined by wavelength. White, black, and gray are considered to be neutrals because they lack hue. Value is the lightness or darkness of a color. It is most often referenced with a comparative gray scale that ranges from pure black, which is a value of 0, to pure white, which is a value of 10. If white is added to a color to achieve a lighter value, it is referred to as a tint. So like pink, for example, or mint are examples of tints. However, if black is added to a color to decrease the value, the darker color is referred to as a shade. Chroma is a term used to describe a color's saturation, intensity, or purity. A hue at 100% strength is fully saturated. A hue with an extremely low saturation appears to be gray. The challenge of color matching is one that designers are always faced with. So in hopes of maintaining color consistency, fabrics from different lots are carefully dyed using the same chemical compositions. So it is very important as a designer, for example, if you're designing a skirt, when you go to the fabric store and you purchase fabric, it's important to always know your dye lot number from that bolt of fabric. This is because if you need to go back to the store and purchase more fabric, you want to be sure that you're purchasing from the same dye lot. Why is that, you say? Because if you purchase your original piece of fabric from dye lot number 1, but you purchase additional fabric from dye lot number 2, oftentimes those two lots do not exactly match. Yes, it may be the color red, but typically dye lot number 2 will differ from dye lot number 1. Colors also appear different on fabrics. So consider the color green, but consider it on satin versus suede. This color will look different on these two fabrics because of the fibers and the yarns that are used and the finishes also that are used to create those fabrics. Lighting can also impact color. So color that you look at in the sunlight may look very different under fluorescent lights. The basic color schemes. Monochromatic, analogous, complementary, triadic, and achromatic. So let's start with monochromatic. In a monochromatic color scheme, only shades and tints of one hue are used in a color plan. In an analogous scheme, 2 or 3 contiguous colors on the color wheel are used to create analogous color schemes. For example, blue and green and the intermediate colors between those hues can be used to create a complementary scheme is produced by utilizing colors that are opposites on the color wheel. Interesting variations on the complementary scheme are created by using 2 complementary schemes at the same time. This is known as double complementary, or utilizing colors that are adjacent on the color wheel to one of the selected colors, split complementary. In the triadic scheme, 3 colors that are equidistant on the color wheel are utilized. With an achromatic color scheme, this is one in which only neutrals are used. So you have white, black, beige, and gray that are considered to be neutrals. So here's an example or a photograph of the different color schemes. Color story. Trends influence which colors will be used each season. Now, colors can be prompted by world events, art, the automobile industry, and other sources of inspiration. For each collection, designers have a color story. Now, a color story will connect the pieces of a line. It will also unify the designer's message. It will indicate how pieces can be worn together, and it will tell a story. Critiquing fashion. One way to validate creativity is to communicate ideas and products to others in the field. Arbiters or judges of design are professionals in the apparel field who judge creative products. They include esteemed designers and industry practitioners, editors of noted fashion publications, and university professors. So Andre Leon Talley, a well-known fashion journalist, would be considered an arbiter. Now, what is the critique criteria that they look at? Some of the critique criteria include vividness of ideas. So they're looking to see that the design displays a vibrant or exciting viewpoint. Conceptual incongruity. The design displays ideas that seem strange, absurd, or even inappropriate. It may be humorous or make you smile. Provocative questions. Does the design cause you to think and consider many different viewpoints? Different perspectives. The design is presented from a perspective that is not common to most people. Movement. The design suggests movement or action. Abstractness. The design goes beyond conveying what is literal and asks the viewer to interpret its meaning. Context. The design tells a story or the background to the creation is presented. Synthesis. The design combines multiple inspirations in a single presentation. And fantasy. The design is derived from mythical, fabled, or fictional sources.